Hi, class. Welcome to week 5. I wanted to thank you guys for your really great vignettes. I've enjoyed reading them. I'm sure for you it feels like a lot of writing. It's been a lot of reading. And so I appreciate your patience with me trying to get through them. And I want to be able to comment on them and look over them. And so I apologize if it's felt like it takes me a week to do it. Um, I wanted to also let you know. A couple of the scenarios from the vignettes. I think the first one was the gentleman's name was Mark, and this last one was Sarah. And I just want to touch on a couple things. With Mark, Mark caught himself in a situation where he showed up one day and his family was gone, and so then he started doing therapy with couples, and he was very bitter and judgmental and things of that nature. And I think I had a couple different vignettes I read where, it's like, well, this is shocking, him being an MFT, like as if he shouldn't have family problems. And I just want to say, despite what we do as our professional job, that doesn't mean we're not capable of having really hard situations at home. We are far from perfect as people, and we have faults and shortcomings, and life is sometimes very far from perfect, as we all know. So, I'm not saying that Mark maybe shouldn't have been more aware of what was going on in his house. But the reality is, no one gets married in intention to end up in Mark's situation. And most people who end up in Mark's situation say just one day it happened, you know. Some of you maybe can relate to that in your own personal story. So I just want you guys to be mindful and self aware of like you guys are capable of being in any situation yourselves, regardless of your field. I always say this in regards to pastors, right? Like a lot of people expect pastors' families to be perfect, and that is far from the truth. And a lot of times, that pressure to be perfect is what causes a lot of problems. So, hey, you're an MFT. Of course, I hope you guys have all great lives and great family lives and great relationships, but sometimes they're not. And that's just the reality of life. Okay. Also, too, with Sarah, I think being a Christian, obviously, I think that's obvious. Being a Christian, obviously, you know, our faith is important to us and our values are important to us. However, when you are sitting in front of a client, that not that that doesn't matter to you, but that may not matter to them. And so trying to find that balance of still being true to yourself, but also honoring where that person is and where they're coming at. I have a lot of clients that come in and want to talk about spiritual things, and I have some clients that never once bring it up. And that doesn't mean God's not in the room with me. That doesn't mean I can't pray for my clients. That doesn't mean that the Spirit can't lead me in session. I just don't have to like tell my clients that. That doesn't mean it's not happening. And so I just want to make you aware of that, because even though you're not talking about biblical things, that doesn't mean God can't be in the room with you. God's with you wherever you go, assuming you believe in the Lord. So just a FYI on that, but yeah, Sarah was definitely pushing spirituality down her clients' throats, and that was costing her her business and all those things. But I just wanted to notify you guys of that, because I think it's very easy to then get worried, like, oh, my faith, like, what does that mean for my faith? And I think your faith is very much still part of who you are, regardless of who you're in front of, right? So, anyways, those are just some little tidbits. Today, we're going to be going over chapter 7. But I just wanted to point out in here, there's a couple different articles, and I know there's a lot of reading and a lot you guys are doing, so I know it can be overwhelming. But there's something here. We talked about confidentiality. We talked about a bit about reporting last week. Um, but there's some information further on here. Child abuse law change with pornography, and that was a big thing, especially with sexting. And if you don't know what that is, that's sending sexual pictures through text. Big thing in high schools with minors sending inappropriate pictures to one another. Christians in multiple relationships, professional therapy, and sex. That was that little brochure I told you guys about last week. So there's some information here. I just wanted you to be mindful of it. As we're going over chapter 7, we're talking a lot about boundaries and boundary crossing. And I get my description of boundaries from Cloud and Townsend. They wrote the Bible of Boundaries, the Boundary Book, and they describe boundaries as being a fence around a yard. And what separates our fences what separates our yards typically in California is a fence. And so we want to have healthy boundaries, and healthy boundaries look like a nice little picket fence where you can see out, people can see in, but you determine what's in and out of your yard. And a lot of times people are not good with that, and so we have some issues. So we don't want boundaries to be crossed in relationships with clients, especially if there's one way to kind of steer clear of that is having not multiple different kinds of relationships with clients. Sometimes that's inevitable. Um, Sometimes that's inevitable just because of the nature of the city you live in or where you work. There might be some sort of, for lack of a better term, cross contamination. Like you might just so happen be willing to see a client and then you find out later they attend your church. Or you might live in a very small town and practice in a very small town, so it's very normal to be running into people who maybe are coming to your office. I think, you know, you just have to be very mindful of that and be very careful because it can get you in very sticky situations. Um, so just be mindful of that. You might make choices to not practice where you live to kind of avoid some of those things, but sometimes you realize the world is a very small place and it's unavoidable. But you want to be careful to not do that purposely as much as possible. Okay. Um, Again, crossing a boundary. Now, sometimes it can be beneficial. Like, for example, I had a client, a little minor client, and she was in like children's theater. And so she put on a play. And so it was really important for her for me to come and see the play. So I went and saw the play. Now, I didn't mingle with family. I didn't meet anyone. I literally showed up, saw the play, and then moved on. But um, that was that was like in order to encourage a positive relationship with the client. She was really into it. I wanted to support. Now, sometimes that could be going to a sporting event for a client, um, a way to kind of support them, um, something they're doing, a competition or whatever, as a way to support them. It's beneficial. That may not ever be going to a wedding. Okay, I've been invited to weddings and I was like, no. Um, because you show up to a wedding for a client, and some of you may be like, well, what's the big deal? I show up to a wedding. I'm sitting at the reception. How do you know the couple? It's just awkward, right? Like avoid those situations. They're not there. That's a boundary that's not good. Obviously, this is very obvious. A breach would be obviously a therapeutic relationship turning into a sexual relationship, obviously inappropriate and problematic. Um, you want to check on, are you minimizing things? So set healthy boundaries from the beginning. Make sure you're getting your informed consent for clients. Discuss potential risks when you meet, like say for example, someone from your church comes to see you. It's not someone you have a relationship necessarily, but like again, it's kind of like when you buy a car and nobody has that car, and then all of a sudden you buy the car and everybody and their mother has that car. So all of a sudden you see this person at church all the time. So discuss what that's going to look like. If I see you in public, this is how I'm going to act around you unless you engage in this way. Sometimes I even say a lot of things to people when, or not a lot of things, but I have a little spiel I give to clients that have been referred because, you know, maybe Susie Q referred them to me, but I didn't want to let them know that I can't confirm or deny knowing Susie Q. And two, like, I'm not going to tell Susie Q anything, you know. I have doctors that refer to me. And so I tell them, like, just because your doctor referred to me doesn't mean your doctor can call me and ask about you. Okay. Just to ease their mind and to know, like, their confidentiality is safe with me and things of that nature. So again, with the potential of multiple types of relationships, you may want to consult, talk to your supervisor about it, document it in notes, examine your own motives, and again, refer when necessary. That would be a safe time to refer. Because maybe it's one of those things where the situation arises, maybe you didn't realize all the connections and then the connections are like coming together and you're like, you know what, I know you. I had a weird situation happen one time. I had a client come in. No joke. This is like so weird. She starts talking and then I make the connection. Oh, her sister is best friends with my relative. That is a distance relative, but a relative. Then as we start talking further, I realize one of her other sisters had a dog who was given to that relative that I'm related to. And then that relative gave the dog to me. So my dog, like she's met my dog. Like I was putting all this together in my head while she was talking, and I didn't want one. I knew that was like I probably could get away with not saying anything, and maybe they would never make the connection. I don't know if she was ever going to tell anyone that she was in counseling, but I knew it, and it made me feel uncomfortable that I knew all this information. I didn't know anything about her, but I just knew that we had all these connections. And so midway through our session, I'm like, hey, I just want to tell you some things because I need you to feel comfortable here. And I would never want someone else to say that they knew me and then you be like, why didn't you tell me? So I just laid it out for her. And of course, um, she had no problem with it. She didn't feel uncomfortable with it at all. But I felt compelled that I needed to talk to her. Okay. So you might have to have those kinds of conversations with someone. Again, if you live in a small community, you don't want to isolate yourself and never be in Bible studies or in the PTA or things of that nature. And so you're really going to have to set very clear boundaries and rules of what this will look like and functioning in a small town. And that's something that you have to be mindful of when you begin practicing and where you decide to practice and where you live. Is this really going to be conducive for my life and my lifestyle? You know, I know it sounds strange, but your world can become very, very small in some of these situations. I was at Little League with one of my kids, and I'm in the bathroom with my other kid, and a client walks in with her kid. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm sorry, like, I don't look like this all the time. You might be like what? I'm like, with makeup on, like, I look like a train wreck, like when I'm with my children, because that's usually probably how I feel and what the heck is, like, what's going on, you know? So I run into her in the bath. I mean, it was just awkward. And it's like, even though I've been doing this for a long time, those situations don't happen all the time. So it was just uncomfortable because it was a former client. I haven't seen her in a long time. It was just weird. We both had babies. Like, it was just very strange. So, anyways, those are things um, for you to be mindful of when you get in this field and where you decide to work. And sometimes I think early on, hopefully in your clinical experience, we're real hungry for clients because we got those 3,000 hours. So it's almost like someone refers them to me, I'll see them. I don't care if they're like my next door neighbor, but you'll realize not a good idea. No bueno. I can't, like, I have friends that call me and they're like, can I just come and see you? And I'm like, no, you can't come and see me. Like, I'm your friend. Like, people don't get it. And it's not because they're trying to take advantage of you or anything. They just don't understand what we do and the nature of our job and our role and they just don't understand. And so I've met with friends as a friend that has these skills versus meeting with them as a pseudo therapist for them. Okay. So you just have to be careful about that because everyone's going to be like, oh, like my mom always jokes, if you were to move back home, you would have all these clientele. I'm like, I couldn't see any of these people. They're like your friends, their kids. Like, no, no. So prior to establishing a bartering relationship, sometimes like we look at like Little House on the Prairie and they paid the doctor with like chickens or something. So sometimes bartering can happen. So evaluate whether it puts you at a risk of impaired professional judgment. Determine the value of goods or service in a collaborative fashion. So is this an even exchange? The length of time for the arrangement, and then document the arrangement. Okay. So these are some of the guidelines for bartering. Minimize unique financial arrangements. If bartering is used, it is better to exchange goods rather than services, so items. Both therapist and client should have a written agreement for the compensation. If a misunderstanding develops, the matter should be dealt with a mediator, not by you and your client. Accepting gifts. When deciding whether or not to accept a gift from a client, you need to ask, what is the monetary value of the gift? What are the clinical implications of accepting or rejecting the gift? Huge. Now, back in the day, it used to be like, no, this is the thing. There's some cultures, it's very rude to not accept a gift. Okay. Now, most of the time, your client well enough to know their intentions, to know why they're giving it to you, where it's coming from. So you would be the best judge of whether you want to accept something or not. Some people say very clearly from the very beginning, I cannot accept gifts, to kind of take that away. Now, I'll have clients, like, I always tell them, like, you do not have to get me anything or whatever. I'll have clients that still, like, Christmas time, they'll get me something or give me a card or whatever. Never something that they have to do. I always tell them, but I know these are people, like, it's very sincerely from their heart, they want to do that. And if I were to say sorry, like, they would feel very rejected. So that's just something to think about, if these things come up, like with gifts. Now, if I felt like there was an inappropriate attachment, or it was like an extreme monetary gift, like, I wouldn't accept it. But again, accepting gifts is something that does happen. Clients sometimes are very thankful. They just, this is a little something. We're done with therapy. I wanted to get you, whatever. You just have to take those things into consideration. Okay, disadvantage of socializing with clients. Therapists may not challenge clients they know socially because of the need to be liked and accepted by the client. So meaning, if you were to see a friend or a distant friend or a friend of a friend, you may be nervous to be who you are in therapy because you want the client to like you. Counselors' own needs may be enmeshed with those of their clients to the point that objectivity is lost. And I think being objective is huge in therapy. People come to a therapist because they want objectivity. And if we're leaning one way or the other because we want things to be done a certain way, then we're really risking the benefits for the client. So just be mindful of that with, again, who you decide to take into your counseling room, if you can really truly be objective towards them. Sexual attraction in therapy. Again, everyone may say, oh, that would never happen. It happens. If you ever become a camp member, look in the back of the camp magazine. Happens every quarter. It happens. Attraction to clients is a prevalent experience among both male and female therapists. Simply experiencing sexual attraction to a client without acting on it makes the majority of therapists feel guilty, anxious, and confused. We know that attraction is, like, inevitable in people, right? Like, we probably wouldn't feel as guilty about it if I was attracted to a person in the like at the grocery store or Target, or I don't know, like some person that I've come across, and I might be able to acknowledge that they're good looking. There's a difference between finding a client sexually attractive and being preoccupied with this attraction. So you could think maybe someone's good looking, but if you're really focused on it, or you're noticing you're flirting, or you're acting a way that's inappropriate, that's where it's like, whoa, we got a problem. Neglecting to attend to family of origin issues can lead to blind spots, such as being attracted to clients. So if there's problems at home, we mentioned Mark, like maybe if Mark was feeling not great at home, and then he's feeling lonely, and this client feels this need and he's attracted to her, like that could be susceptible to a problem. And this could happen in any workplace situation. But with us in our level of, I know this isn't the right word, but with our authority that we could have in someone's life, or power, you could lose a lot by acting on something of that nature. Okay? To minimize the likelihood of sexual transgressions, learn to recognize sexual attraction and how to deal with these feelings constructively. Seek professional support during time of loss of crisis, and examine and monitor feelings and behaviors towards clients continually. Okay? Know the difference between having sexual attraction to a client and acting on it, and learn about the possible adverse consequences. Okay, there's a lot of bad consequences. Establish and maintain clear boundaries with your clients. Terminate therapeutic relationship when sexual feelings obscure objectivity, and recognize that direct, explicit disclosing of sexual feelings can run the risk of harming clients and may therefore be unethical. So, it's just a very touchy, uncomfortable situation. So you got to really keep yourself in check. Okay. Rather than making an explicit communication of sexual feelings for clients, acknowledge caring and warmth within the therapeutic relationship. Practice a risk management approach. Be aware of timing and the location of scheduled appointments. Obviously, no touching. Be open to using supervision, consultation, and personal therapy throughout your career as a way to help you. Like, we're not above help. And I contact colleagues all the time on cases, and we talk about situations. because I don't know everything, and no one expects you guys to know everything, and we're human beings and we go through things and we are given different kinds of situations, and it's like, what's the best approach, you know? So stay in contact with your fellow classmates, stay in contact with your professors, stay in contact with former, future, and soon will be former supervisors. They're out there to help you. Okay. Clients who are the victims of sexual misconduct suffer dire consequences. They may not trust the opposite sex. They may never trust a therapist again. They could have guilt, depression, PTSD. There's a feeling of rejection and low self esteem, and potentially suicidal ideation, which you do not want to be responsible for. That would be a huge nightmare. You can end up getting sued. You can lose your license. You could have a felony. Um, you could lose the ability to be part of professional organizations, lose your insurance coverage, and ultimately losing your job. And you guys are working currently too hard to lose your job and to lose your license on this kind of situation. So just be on guard. Never get too comfortable. Um, and again, just be mindful of the kind of situations you want to be in. And would you want somebody else in that situation? If you wouldn't want somebody else in that situation, then you probably shouldn't be in that situation yourself. I hope you're well, staying healthy, and I will see you next week, week 6. So we're at the end. Hang in there.